How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video here at the Nez MMA channel. I'm your host, Omar. Today we're talking about UFC 282, a pretty decent card. Not the best. Was better a few weeks ago, but, injury bug always plagues almost every card that we are sometimes spoiled with, but that's just the reality of the situation. But whatever, man, we're gonna get into it. I'm gonna keep this one as short and sweet as possible for you guys. So, first fight on the card is Cameron Simon versus Steven Kozlow. Cameron Simon, one of the Contender Series guys, who was really good, very young cat out of South Africa. He's very technical, got very good boxing. And very young, and I think he's gonna give Steven Kozlow a hard time. He was originally gonna fight Johnny Lawrence, but Ronnie Lawrence, but he had to pull out due to injury, I believe. So Steven Kozlow coming in on short notice. Both of these guys are 6-0, but I think Cameron Simon being on a full camp and training for, I think, a far better fighter. No disrespect to Steven, I'm gonna have to go with Cameron Simon, possibly by TKO finish. Excuse me. All right, moving on to the next one. Daniel De Silva versus Vinicius Salvador. Great flyweight fight. 11-4 versus 14-4. Both Brazilians. Both scrappy dudes. Very fun guys to watch. Daniel De Silva's had a rough career so far in the UFC. I believe he's 0-2. He did fight tough opposition. Jeff Molina and I believe a Mexican buddy by the name of Victor Altamirano. And he got finished in both fights. Actually, he's on a 3-fight losing streak. He lost to Altamirano, Francisco Figueiredo, who is Davison Figueiredo's, I believe, younger brother. He's not nearly as good, no disrespect, but hey, man. Sometimes, one of those siblings is just naturally more gifted than the other, and Davison got the better of that too, right there. But yeah, on a 3-fight losing streak, all by finish. 2 in the first round, 1 in the second. But all the guys he's losing to are very good flyweights. And I just think that Vinicius Salvador is a level above Daniel De Silva. He's 14-4, but if you watch his Contender Series fight, arguably one of the contenders of Fight of the Year. It was a fantastic fight. I've seen that fight 2 or 3 times already. It was so fun to watch while it was happening live on the Contender Series. It was just fantastic, man. If you guys have ESPN Plus, I would recommend you check it out. Just go on the search bar, type in Vinicius Salvador, or look up, I think, the Contender Series week 6, I believe, if you want to see a great scrap. Or I think, actually, never mind, I think that was week 2. I think this was when Dana was upset with how the first week went, and he's like, yo, you guys need to show the hell up if you're trying to get some contracts. Yep, week 2 on August 2nd, 2022. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Vinicius Salvador. Vinicius Salvador, right? Yeah, Vinicius Salvador, TKO. I think these early prelim fights are gonna be bangers. Sorry for moving the camera. They're just gonna be bangers, man. Just overall, just because of the matchups that we got so far. Eric Silva versus TJ Brown at 145. Eric Silva, another Contender Series guy. TJ Brown, a little bit more of a vet in the UFC. He's kind of been chilling in the prelims for most fight night cards. Eric Silva's a really good fighter, man. He's 9-1. He's a big featherweight too. Looking him in there when he fought in the Contender Series, I believe he was a champion in a regional scene. I think with Lux Fight League, and he's beating good opposition for the most part. You know, fighting guys that are 8-3, 12-5, 18-6. You know, that's the kind of experience you want to get when you're on the regional scenes. You know, guys with decent records, not bad records. You know, that kind of are just gonna make you better overall. And this guy's a submission artist, bro. He's his last. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins are by finish. 4 in the first round. 4 by submission. All 4 of those are by rear naked choke, and the one prior, it was by ground and pound finish. Fighting this guy named Anvar Boynasavar. Honestly, that was really bad matchmaking by the Contender Series guys. I don't know if it's Mick and Sean Shelby who did that, but yeah, man, that guy was kind of just kind of fed for slaughter, really. But you know, Eric Silva did his job, and TJ Brown, 16-9, not the best record, but you know, he's 2-3 in the UFC. Only lost to Shalin Nordembayek, who's kind of been a little bit on the news, really, but not because of his fault. It was mostly his opponent and his opponent's coach, James Krause. If you know what's going on, not good news for James Krause. But before that, he was on a 2-fight win streak. Before that, lost 2. And then he won his Contender Series fight. So he's kind of been, a little bit off here and there. I do think that Eric Silva's going to get a submission finish, arguably in the first or second round. TJ Brown is fairly decent. He's more of a stand-up guy. I don't think he's going to be able to hold off the size and the grappling of Eric Silva, so I'm going to have to go with Eric Silva via submission in the first or second round. I think that we're going to get a good amount of finishes on this card by you've seen so far. Moving on, Billy Quarantillo, Alexander Hernandez at 145 pounds. Hernandez moving down from 155 to 145. I don't think that's a good idea. Billy Quarantillo is not a small featherweight either. He's 16-4, I believe, coming off a win. No, he's coming off a loss to Shane Burgos. Fantastic fight that was over a year ago. If who was it? Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje weren't on that main card, Billy Q and Shane Burgos were going to get fight of the night. But other than that, since his return to the UFC, he's 4-2. Losing to Shane Burgos, who was top 15 at the time. Gavin Tucker, a really good fighter who gives a lot of guys problems, and it was a back and forth fight. It's 29-28, nothing to be ashamed of. Same thing with the Shane Burgos fight, 29-28. But he's beating guys like Gabriel Benitez, good fighter. Kyle Nelson, good fighter. Spike Carlisle, good fighter who's doing big things over there in Bellator right now, fighting their former featherweight champion. So I think Billy Q's really good at featherweight. I think Alexander Hernandez, who is very muscle bound for 155, he's not the tallest guy, but he didn't look small at lightweight, so I'm kind of puzzled by this decision to move down to 145. If he thinks he can make the weight, we'll see. It's still early to tell. We got to look how he looks at the weigh-ins, but just how things play out when fighters move down in weight class, and seeing as Hernandez's career has panned out since his Beneil Dariush KO win back in 2017. He's been on and off. Lost to Dad Cerrone, lost to Thiago Moises, lost to Drew Dober. All fantastic fighters, don't get me wrong. But I say also Renato Moicano. But when you're barely getting by Francisco Trinaldo in a fight you arguably lost, you beat Chris Gutschmacher, who doesn't really belong in the UFC. Same with Mike Breedman, doesn't belong in the UFC. You're starching these guys, His best win is Oliver Aubin Mercier at Beneil Dariush, who he starched, but he did kind of do a fake glove touch there, which kind of caught Beneil off guard. And if there's one way you're going to beat Beneil Dariush is by rushing him and throwing him off his game like that. Beneil has completely recovered since then, undefeated, on a win streak, and Hernandez is really not panned out well. He's a guy that just middles in the 20 to 30 rankings of the lightweight division. But going back to that, I'm seeing a lot of butts like Izzy. Billy Quarantillo, Alexander Hernandez. I'm going to have to go with Billy Q here. I just think Hernandez, folds under pressure when it's not going his way. He ends up kind of folding a bit. I'm not going to say he shows a lack of heart, but that's what I see in there, and that we've seen it time and time again with his losses. Billy Q just kind of gets better as the fight goes on. He doesn't have that quit in him. He keeps fighting. Even though he was getting pieced up a little bit by Shane Burgos, he kept coming and kept scrapping. Same thing with Gavin Tucker. I think if this goes in the second half of the second round, going into the third, I'm gonna have to go with Billy Q just taking over. Especially with Hernandez cutting an extra 10 pounds. How's that going to sap his cardio? Is he going to have the speed advantage, which he had at lightweight for most of the time? I don't think so. So I'm going to go with Billy Q either via a 29-28 decision or a late TKO finish in the third round. All right. I think now we are going to the televised portion of the prelims. Chris Curtis versus Joaquin Buckley. Good fight. Sleeper fight, honestly. Chris Curtis has kind of made splashes since he's came in on short notice in the UFC, beating Phil Hawes and Brennan Allen and Rodolfo Vieira. He is coming off a loss to Jack Hermanson. He didn't look great in there. I do believe he came in on short notice, though, so I'm not going to hold it against him too much. But he did kind of look like shit, and he did look frustrated when he couldn't get into range over the taller, lengthier fighter. He's fortunate that he's fighting someone in Buckley who is very similar stature as himself. I think they're both 5'10". I think Buckley does have a bit of a reach advantage, but I don't think that Curtis is going to have that issue. I think he's going to have more of an issue of Buckley's power and athleticism. Both these guys are coming off losses, like I said earlier with Curtis, but Buckley's coming off a loss to Nasruddin Imavov. But he turned it on in the third round. He was giving him all of a bit of problems there at the end, and showed that he still got grit, he still got heart. Um, this one I was so 50-50 on, but gun to my head, if I had to choose, I'm gonna have to go with Buckley here. I think Buckley's a younger man, more athletic. He think he's got more time to develop. Curtis does come out of a great camp, and then does train with a lot of good guys like Strickland, now Shabazian. I think the main event, Ankle Live, I think has also been there for a bit. So I just think Buckley's going to take it. I think Buckley's taking his career very seriously, even though he's had some losses. I think just being at 28, that's going to help him out so much more. So I'm going to have to go with Buckley via unanimous decision in a close competitive fight, to be quite honest with you. All right. Next up is Shabazian versus Dalchalugian Bula. Another fight at 185 like the one beforehand. Shabazian's career hasn't panned out. This kid was almost seen as a future champion when he starched Brad Tavares 2 years ago, I believe, on the Masvidal Diaz fight. Um, no one has starched Brad Tavares like that. Only the only other person to do that was Robert Whitaker. Romero took him to a decision. Adesanya took him to a decision. When you starch someone like Brad Tavares out like that, that means you're a problem in the middleweight division. But Edmund being at the camp that he was, the camp that I'm referring to is Glendale Fight Club, which is where Ronda Rousey trained at. The head coach is Edmund Tarverdian. I believe I said his last name correctly. But he's moved from there. He said it was a bit of a toxic gym. He really didn't like how things were playing out with him and his coaches. And I agree with him. A lot of fighters seemed to go downhill when they went over to that camp. Travis Brown back in the day was never the same. Jake Ellenberger was never the same. Ronda Rousey was never the same. After a certain time being there, once the level of opposition caught up to them. Dalchalugan Bula, I don't think is a fantastic fighter. He is explosive. He is great, but he does lack fight IQ. He does lack cardio. He's coming off 3 losses against Punahele Soriano, Cody Brundage. He kind of shat the bed against the Cody Brundage fight. He was piecing up Brundage and shoots a lazy takedown and gets guillotined. That shows very little fight IQ. Marc-Andre Barriou didn't look great. Marcus Perez didn't look great. Got knocked out by Ankalaev, who's headlining. Defeat to Quantanza, didn't belong in the UFC. He's 2-4 in the UFC. I think Shabazian is going to honestly starch Dalcha Bula just because I think Dalcha doesn't belong in the UFC. And I think we're going to see a bit of return to form. I'm not going to get my hair blown back, even if he does look completely flawless. He still needs to win a few more before we get up there. Get back to him talking in title contention. But the good thing about Edmund, he's such a young cat, man. The guy's still only 25. He just turned 25 too. Looks like 2 weeks ago. So he's got plenty of time to improve, especially him moving gyms. So I'm looking forward to his performance, him being at a new camp and really showing that he's developed. And I think he's been out for a little bit. So when these kids are so young, it's crazy that I'm saying kid because I'm 28 now. It's crazy that some of these guys are my age. I've been watching this for so long, since I was like 12. He hasn't fought in a year, which honestly kind of makes me a little happy because he's been taking that year, recover after his 3 losses, and get back in there, redevelop, rebuild himself. And you can do that when you're that young of an age, So good for him. I hope he comes out and performs very well. And I still think he's going to get a finish either in the first or second round. But if it does go late, I hope he has really improved his cardio because that's one of his big deficits when he fought. And those said 3 losses was his cardio. But Emma Shabazian, KO, first or second round. All right, headlining. No, I'm wrong. I think Tapology has this fight, but I think the next fight is actually Jay Perrin versus Raul Rosas Jr. For those of you who don't know, Raul Rosas Jr. is the youngest UFC fighter, I think, ever in UFC history. The guy's 18. He's 6-0. He's still a kid. He's still going to high school. Can you believe that shit? And he's good, man. He's really good. He's 6-0. He's primarily a grappler. He has more submission wins. And and at first you're thinking, all right, man. When this guy came onto the Contender Series, I was like, all right, this is kind of just to get eyes on the Contender Series. This might be another Sage Northcutt situation, but especially with the opposition he was fighting. His first fight, fighting a guy 0-1. All right, cut you a break there. Second fight, 0-0. All right. Then his third fight, 1-0, and then 2-0. And then 0-2, I'm like, all right, you're 4-0 fighting a guy 0-2. You're kind of cherry picking opponents here. But he fights Mando Gutierrez, 7-1 fighter. good record, and the guy's coming off a win. He's 8-1 now, or 8-2 now. So that shows you that Raul Rosas is actually really good. He beat Mando Gutierrez, who's a very good fighter, and he was kind of ragdolling him a bit. The grappling exchanges were pretty close, and I think that was mostly due to Gutierrez's strength. More of a grown man's strength. Raul Rosas is still building into his body. He's a bantamweight right now. Guarantee you, in maybe 2-3 years, he's going to be a featherweight. He's going to have a hard time cutting down to 135. Jay Perrin is 10-6. Hasn't had a good UFC career. I believe he's coming off 2 losses. Yep, to Arichi Lang and Mario Batista, both really good fighters. I just don't think he's good enough to beat Raul Rosas, especially with some of his losses too. He's had 4 losses on the regional scene. He's had a couple good wins here and there, but nothing fantastic. I just think Raul Rosas, especially with how determined and focused he is on winning, he's taken his career very seriously. His dad was a mixed martial artist. His younger brother's a mixed martial artist. Family's full of fighters. So he's training in there day in and day out, getting better. I follow him on Instagram after he won. I see that he's nonstop training, constantly working on getting better. So I'm going to go with Raul Rosas via unanimous decision. I don't think he gets the finish here. I think he wins via 30-27 with a 29-28 in there with Jay Perrin, having a little bit of a veteran tactics here and there. All right, headlining the prelims, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Chris Daukaus. All right, 16 minutes, we're doing pretty good. All right, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Chris Daukaus. This one's kind of easy, man. I think Jairzinho Rozenstruik is a lock here. Chris Daukaus is 12-5, coming off 2 TKO losses. The last fought in March. I know he's taking some time off, but Jairzinho, dude, that guy, he's just a better striker. He's a better kickboxer. I've seen some people say that Chris might have the boxing advantage. I don't think so. I think Chris Daukaus hits a little too much. He's hasn't looked fantastic in his 2 losses. Even in his biggest win against Shamil Abdurakhimov, he didn't look great. He's getting pieced up a little bit. So I'm going to have to go with Jairzinho Rozenstruik, just being a far better striker. And Chris Daukaus hasn't shown that he has the grappling chops to get Jairzinho Rozenstruik to the ground. So Rozenstruik for your first round KO. All right, moving on to the main card. My most hyped fight of the card, the banger of the night, the one that everyone should be watching, is Bryce Mitchell versus Ilia Topuria. Fantastic fight. 2 undefeated fighters, 2 prospects, pretty much still. Both very young. Ilia Topuria, 25 years old. Bryce Mitchell, I believe, is 28 years old. Both on good win streaks. In the UFC, I think Bryce Mitchell is a 6-fight win streak. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, freaking ads, man. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 6-fight win streak. Last win against Edson Barbosa earlier this year. Same with Topuria on a 4-fight win streak. Also won in March earlier this year by KO. This is a fantastic fight. Bryce Mitchell is a big featherweight, strong featherweight, really good grappler, very strong wrestler. Topuria, a very fantastic striker, but also a very underrated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that people don't seem to know. 7 of his 8 wins at first in the regional scene were by submission. When he had his first fight against Yusuf Zalal, the commentary was talking about the grappling of Topuria and that's how he's going to get the victory here against Zalal. And then he starts knocking out people left and right. Flatline Damon Jackson, flatlined Ryan Hall, flatline Jai Herbert. Now all of a sudden people are thinking, this guy's a dynamic striker that Bryce Mitchell needs to get on the ground, and that's the only way to path to victory. A lot of people who are picking Bryce Mitchell, being biased, saying he's just going to wet blanket him and make it easy. Topuria's just a striker. Far from it. Topuria is a well-rounded fighter, fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, fantastic wrestling, and well-rounded overall. Topuria's only weakness is, I would probably say, is cardio, and that he throws too many hook punches. I think he needs to develop his straight punching game, really develop a jab, a straight, probably throwing in some kicks in there as well, and just mix it up a little more and throw feints. But he's so young, man, he's just going to continue to develop. And with that being said, the way I'm talking, I'm going to have to go with Topuria via TKO finish. I just don't think Bryce Mitchell will have an answer for Topuria's striking, and once it starts going bad for him in the grappling, I think it's going to be a little difficult for him. And Bryce Mitchell has shown to have also a questionable gas tank himself. He slowed down in third rounds a lot, and his striking hasn't looked fantastic. Yeah, he knocked down Edson Barbosa, but who hasn't knocked down Edson Barbosa really at that top level? So I'm gonna have to go with Topuria via TKO finish. All right, Darren Till versus Dricus du Plessis. And this one's so hard to say because what Darren Till are we going to get, right? Darren Till has looked like shit his past 2 fights. Even in his one against Gaslam, he looks like shit. Not just in the cage, but physically, he doesn't look shredded. He doesn't look in shape. It looks like he more just cut weight at 185 and then he just hopped in there and fought. I don't like that. I'm going to have to go with Dricus du Plessis just because Dricus is also not just a great striker, but also a great grappler. Darren Till is training at Tiger Muay Thai. Yes, he's rolling with good guys, but he hasn't been with Hamzat this whole training camp. People are saying, "Oh, Darren Till's training with Hamzat. He's going to be this. His grappling defense is going to be top notch." Well, he didn't have him all camp. I'm sure it helped him get in shape a little bit when he pulled out of his last fight. But Dricus du Plessis is in shape year round. An awkward, funky striker, and with devastating power. He's 17-2, and he's got a great record. He's won the KSW championship. That's one of the best organizations outside of the UFC. So it depends what Darren Till we get, but I can't put my heart into it. I got to think with my brain here. I think Dricus du Plessis is going to get the W. Not only that, du Plessis is also a young guy, man. He's not that old. He's 28 years old. He turns 29 in December, so he's just hitting his physical prime. He's 3-0 in the UFC. He's been active. He's been winning good, and all three are 2 by KO and a good fight against Tavares. He shows that he has a good chin, and he shows that he can go 3 hard rounds. Darren Till has slowed down, especially when the pace is high. He looks like he has good cardio sometimes because he's had numerous 5-round fights, but that's because the output is so low, especially from Till's side. So I'm going to have to go with du Plessis here via unanimous decision, possibly a late 3rd round submission win once Darren Till is a little bit gassed and kind of doesn't have it much in the gas tank to defend the submissions anymore in the grappling. So du Plessis decision win. All right, Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Alex Morono. On late notice fight, originally was going to be Robbie Lawler, but Robbie Lawler got injured on Monday, so this is now 180 catchweight fight. Morono's underrated, but Morono always struggles against these higher levels guys, especially with decent striking. Morono's on a good win streak. I think he's on a 3-fight win streak, 4-fight win streak actually. Matt Summelsberger, great win. Mickey Gall, not a great win. David Zawada, okay win. Cerrone, not a great win. Before that, lost to Pettis. Before that, Reese McKee's not even in the UFC anymore. And before they got starched by Chaos Williams. Morono's good against these other guys that are at his level. I don't think Alex Morono's ever going to be a top 15 guy. I think Ponzinibbio still has that top 15 skill set, even though he's coming off 2 losses. But they were both by split decision. I don't believe he lost the Pajeda fight on rewatch, and I don't believe he lost the Jeff Neal fight on rewatch. And Jeff Neal's my boy. He's one of my boys. He's one of the guys that I want to succeed, but you got to be honest with yourself when you're rewatching these fights and studying. Jeff Neal did not win that fight, in my opinion, but it's not my opinion that matters. It's the judges, and they gave Jeff Neal the win. Ponzinibbio's had a full camp. I'm sure Alex Morono's has stayed in shape, but I think Santiago Ponzinibbio is going to have a good performance here. He's going to look great in the stand-up. I think he's going to give Morono problems, and he's just going to kind of piece him up a bit. And Morono is pretty good. He does fight a little awkward, but just a short notice. Literally, I think it was announced on Tuesday. It's at 180, so I think Santiago is going to be the fresher, more fit guy, just more prepared. So I got to go with Santiago Ponzinibbio, possibly by TKO. I'm leaning more decision, but it could be a TKO finish. All right, Paddy Pimblett versus Jared Gordon. I just made a weird face there. But Jared Gordon is a good fighter. This is probably the best fighter that Paddy Pimblett has fought in the UFC. I think hands down, Jared Gordon's really good, man. He's 19-5, and he's on a 2-fight win streak, I believe. Oh no, just one. Leonardo Santos, before that, lost to Grant Dawson, who should be ranked right now, in my opinion, with the unbeaten streak that he has so far in the UFC. And then before that, had a 3-fight win streak over Joe Solecki. Fantastic win. Joe Solecki's one of the more underrated guys. Kind of looks like Christian Pulisic, by the way. Danny Chavez and Chris Fishgold. And then before that, lost to number 1 contender in the world at lightweight, Charles Oliveira. He's got really good grappling, man. Yeah, he has a grappling loss to Grant Dawson. But Grant Dawson has submitted so many guys. Grant Dawson is arguably one of the better grapplers in that division. You know, he's when you look at Grant Dawson's win streak, he's got wins over Julian Erosa, Mike Trezano, Derek Minner, Nander Mariani, Leonardo Santos. Got a draw against Ricky Glenn, and then Jared Gordon and Mark Madsen. That's an 8 unbeaten streak in the UFC. That's a fantastic win streak. So Paddy Pimblett is fighting a very fantastic fighter. Paddy, his biggest weakness, I do think, is his striking. I think his striking is very, very subpar. He got dropped by Rodrigo Vargas, who I believe does not belong in the UFC. Got wobbled by Luigi Vendramini, who does not belong in the UFC. And Jordan Leavitt was giving him a bit of issues, a little bit. Jordan Leavitt is okay. He's not bad. He's not great. He has 3-2 in the UFC. He has a big win over Matt Wyman via slam, beat Matt Sales via submission, but Matt Sales kind of proved that he didn't belong in the UFC. And Trey Ogden, took that by split decision. And Trey Ogden's pretty good, man. Trey Ogden's a good guy. He's a good fighter. So Paddy has beat one good guy in the UFC, but Jared Gooden's like the next level after that. And I think this is going to be a very tough fight for Paddy. I think this is going to go to decision. I think it's going to be 29-28, possibly by split, especially with Jared Gordon moving to Kill Cliff MMA. That's what used to be called Sanford MMA, and I forgot what it was beforehand. But that's where Michael Chandler trains at. Gilbert Burns, Vicente Luque. Who else? Usman still goes in there from time to time, and there are a few other guys too. I don't know why my mind is going a little blank right now. But that's a gym of killers. He's training with top level opposition nonstop, and he's got a good striking coach. It's that funky looking dude with long hair. But you look at it, he's in the corner of guys who are winning. That's great. That's fantastic. But going with that, I'm going to have to go with Paddy Pimblett via decision. I think his size is going to be a bit of an issue, and his grappling superiority just by a little bit. I think they're going to be very even in the grappling, but I'm going to go with Paddy Pimblett via 29-28 decision. I don't think he gets the finish. Jared Gordon is very tough in there. Like I said, he's only lost to top-level guys who I believe are issues in the division, like a Charles Oliveira, like a Grant Dawson. I don't think Paddy is quite at the Charles Oliveira, Grant Dawson level. But I do think he can beat Jared Gordon via decision, though. 29-28 in a hard, grueling fight. Because the grappling exchanges are going to be fun to watch. I hope Paddy has been working on his striking and not focusing on just cutting weight. My man gets balloons up to 205, but not like a Khabib or Gleison Tibau 205. No, he gets a fat 205. He's got a beer belly. His face swells up like crazy. You can't be doing that, man. If you want to take this career seriously, you can't be doing that. Look at Darren Till. Darren Till looks flabby as shit against Derek Brunson, and that's what happens when you just focus too much on trying to get that weight off and make weight, and not focus on your skill set. So I hope Paddy gets a W here. He's a good star. He's something that the UFC needs right now. So I hope he gets a W, but he has shown very clear deficiencies in his game that I hope he's improving, because especially at the higher level, once he fights the Moicanos, the Dan Hookers, the Guram Kutsaledzis, the Thiago Moises, it's gonna be bad. He's gonna get fucking starched. Like there's no questions about it. Like look at Dan Hooker did to Claudio Puelles, who's a fantastic grappler. If you can't take him down, and Paddy can't strike with Dan Hooker, like what the hell's gonna happen to him? So I hope Paddy shows clear improvement in his game, and if he gets a good win, if he doesn't take too much damage, to get him on that London card in March. But yeah, Paddy Pimblett 29-28 decision. All right, moving on. Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev. This is going to be pretty quick, man, because there's not really much to pick out of here. I'm going to have to go with Magomed Ankalaev. I think he's just a bad stylistic matchup for Jan Blachowicz. I don't think Jan is going to be able to deal with the striking with Magomed Ankalaev. People say that Magomed has the grappling advantage. Maybe. I think they're actually kind of even in the grappling. Magomed, I think, is just a quicker, more tactful, more intelligent striker. And he's pretty quick. He's very good with straight punches. He's very good with his front kicks. Very good down the middle. Jan Blachowicz does have decent power, and he does have pretty good grappling, and he is very good at being a counterfighter in a telegraph chess match fight. I just think Magomed is better at that. Magomed, I think, probably won't even bother trying to take it to the ground, and if he does, I think he'll do it more to take rounds instead of trying to get a submission finish. Magomed doesn't really go for takedowns. I think in the 8 fights that he's had, he's gone for like 7 takedowns or something. He's not Islam Makhachev. He's not a Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's more of a striker, but he's a very telegraph striker. And some of his fights do get a little boring, but he just wins rounds by being a little more active and winning. So I'm going to have to go with Magomed Ankalaev via unanimous decision, 50-45 in a quite uneventful fight. Well, those are my picks. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for tuning in. I try to keep this one as short as possible at 30 minutes, but went a little over by a minute, so I'm going to keep working on that. So thank you very much, guys. Have a good day, and goodbye.